Welcome into CBS Sports HQ. We're going to be doing some college football picks. Here's how things went last week. Wow. Danny Kanell, 6-12. Chip Patterson, 11-5. I mean, even the expressions tell the story there.
Right?
In terms of a little difference.
I need a sad face.
So, yeah, we need a sad face, Danny Kanell. Welcome inside our HQ studios. Jeremy St. Louis alongside Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson, because we are going to do some top 25 picks for this week. The new top 25 out. Hasn't really made a ton of adjustments in terms of the games, but Danny, you said you wanted to qualify something before we got started?
Oh, I was just saying, early in the season, this is where there's a lot more luck, Jeremy.
Okay.
Where like the expertise comes in with the film study as the season gets going. So I'm just warning everybody, you might want to take that with a grain of salt. Listen to me later in the season. Early, it's a little bit of a crapshoot.
Those games between the big teams and the FCS teams always kind of throw you off a little bit.
Yes.
All right, let's go, because we got a lot of picks to get through. Let's start right off the top. 23 Georgia Tech at Syracuse. The line here favors Tech 2.5 points. So the total at 59.5. Danny, what do you got?
So earlier, it was over 3.5, and I like Syracuse at home, but they went under that 2.5, that key number. I do think Georgia Tech is playing with a ton of confidence. I'll go ahead and take them to win and cover in this game. Kyle McCord looked pretty good, the transfer in from Ohio State for Syracuse, but it's not going to be the same kind of defense. And we know what Georgia Tech did to Florida State a couple weeks ago. They got a couple wins under their belt. They're feeling pretty good. I still need to see it before I believe it in Q, so I'll take Georgia Tech.
Chip? We're going to Bowling Green. Sorry, I've got to move on. We're going to Bowling Green at Penn State. I'm new at the picks thing, so that's fine. 8 Penn State. They stay where they are. 34.5 point difference here, favoring the Nittany Lions. The total sitting at 48.5. What do you think, Chip?
Well, I'm going to attack this total. This is a really big number, and anybody who follows the Cover 3 podcast knows that it's BG for me in 2024. This Bowling Green team might be one of the best teams in the MAC. I think that Penn State will respect what Bowling Green can do, which means we're going to lean on the defense, and that defense is really the bread and butter. We're excited about Penn State's offense, the way that they looked under Andy Kotelnicki in Game 1 at West Virginia, but especially coming off that game with the long season ahead, this really feels like a spot where the defense is going to go out there and try to hold them to 0. So I'm going to be going under the total in this game, a game where Penn State really just wants to make sure they put Bowling Green at arm's distance and then maybe let some of those backups get some burn.
Yeah, and maybe we're going to be talking about Air Alar here. Air Aller, I should say, over the next couple of weeks. All right, Arkansas at 16, Oklahoma State's where we're headed next. A little bit of a difference here. This is just a 7.5 point spread with the total just over 60, Dan.
Yeah, Arkansas looked really good in week 1, but they didn't play anybody with a pulse. Talon Green's era got started off pretty strong. Bobby Petrino is back. He's the hero there, but Mike Gundy's squad has the best running back in the country. Ollie Gordon picked up right where he did last year. I think this is one where they control the line of scrimmage behind a veteran-laden offensive line and lean on that team from the SEC. So I don't love that it's over that touchdown number, that 7 and a hook, but I'll go ahead and lay them with the Pokes playing at home. They're going to be wild there. It's a game they're all looking forward to. Probably one you circled on the calendar from the beginning of the year. I say the Oklahoma State Cowboys get it done.
Oklahoma State up 1 spot in the AP poll, now sitting at 16. You talk about Ollie Gordon, big week last week. All right, Kansas State also up 1 spot in the AP poll to 17 as they go to Tulane. 9.5 point difference here, Chip, with this total at 48.5.
Big spot here. I looked at Kansas State and I was trying to figure out what I could glean from their week 1 performance. Not a lot, but a lot of checking boxes and meeting expectations and not a lot of injury concerns, which is generally what you would want out of your FCS game. I've got the Wildcats starting to be rated, as highly as, some of those teams in the middle of the top 25, a little bit higher than the AP poll. And I think that at Tulane, you've got a situation where there's so much left when Willie Fritz did. And that includes, not just at the quarterback position. They've had turnover at running back and wide receiver. And while John Summerall did a great job at Troy, I do not think that the personnel there with the Green Wave is quite up to par. I actually love Kansas State being able to get the Wildcats here at this number. I think this is where Kansas State's able to make its announcement as a real Big 12 title contender.
Next up, let's go to Notre Dame. Notre Dame's offensive line looked pretty sharp in that opening win. They enter the top 5 in the AP poll, but here come Northern Illinois, Danny. 28.5 point underdogs, total at 46.5.
So I like to have themes to my picks, and I see certain trends.
Okay.
This is a hangover game, okay?
Okay.
So the hangover game is not that Notre Dame was partying and getting hammered and they're hurting. It's that looming cloud over you after this massive win where everybody's telling you how good you are. You went to College Station, you took care of your business, and you feel awesome. Everybody's telling you how good you are. You have a tendency to not be quite as sharp the next game out. It's at home, and I love the fact that this is over that magical number of 28. I say take Northern Illinois all day long. I think this could be a slow starting game for both teams, so I also like the under. Notre Dame wins, but it's way too big a number in this type of game.
Let's go Baylor at 11, Utah next. Just over 2 touchdown difference here, favoring the Utes. The total at 53.5. Chip, what do you think here?
Oh, I was just waiting for you to finish your sentence so I can say Utah, 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 Utah. Everyone's making the biggest deal over like, oh, Utah's got to navigate all these big road trips. But I'll tell you what, Jeremy, especially after the Utes pass that test, I'm going to be looking to jump on the other side of all these Big 12 teams when they go to Salt Lake City. Because across the Pac-12, they got used to it. And by getting used to it, I mean they were terrified of it. Go talk to any coach or any player. Playing at Utah in front of the Muss is one of the most difficult home field advantages to deal with. And so as all these Big 12 teams start to go up to Salt Lake City and not only deal with the changes now elevation, not only deal with the sheer physicality that a Kyle Whittingham team is going to impose on you at both lines of scrimmage, but just the environment that is there with that huge passionate fan base, the student section going nuts. I don't think that the numbers are going to be caught up quite yet for some of these Big 12 teams making their first visit to Salt Lake City. So at Rice-Eccles, I'm Utah all day in Big 12 play.
Top 25 picks for this week's college football slate here on CBS Sports HQ. No FBS team put up more points than Ole Miss last week, 76 unanswered. They get Middle Tennessee this week. Blue Raiders also week 1 winners. Buffalo and South Florida 1-0 entering their games versus Missouri and Alabama. Vegas picking both teams to lose big. And Ohio State also 35 or more point favorites as they welcome Western Michigan. Welcome back to HQ. We're doing our top 25 picks with our Cover 3 podcast guys, Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell. Chip, let's start with Jacksonville State at number 22, Louisville, who have entered the top 25 chat. The Cardinals at 28.5 point favorites. This total at 58.5. What are you thinking?
I mean, tricky at 28.5, big number, but you are not going to see me back a Jacksonville State team that got absolutely pasted at home by Coastal Carolina, found themselves down 20 some odd points before halftime and never were really even competitive. Chanticleers walk out of there with a 50 burger. Louisville, on the other hand, man, they had a 0 on the scoreboard. And when the Cardinals put a 0 on the scoreboard for the opponent in a shutout, they get donuts. It was Krispy Kreme for everybody. Now that sugar rush is going to carry over into an FBS win. I like Louisville to keep the good vibes rolling. I will lay all of these points.
I love the fact that Chip's bringing donuts into the conversation, the whole part of it. Next up, Middle Tennessee at number 6, Ole Miss. Ole Miss staying where they were in the preseason AP poll, still at 6. 41.5 point favorites here. This total over 60, just shy of 64, Danny.
Yeah, it's a big number. You know Lane Kiffin, he has a lot in common with Oprah Winfrey. Because he likes to give out a lot of stuff. Like, you get one and you get one. He's going to be giving out touchdowns to everybody in his offense, and even more specifically Jackson Dart. Lane Kiffin is one of those coaches who does pay attention to the statistical columns as far as it pertains to the Heisman race, and even potentially that 41.5 number that you see after their name there. I think this is an absolute blowout. I think there's a chance their defense could pitch another shutout as well. Some of those portal additions on the defensive side of the ball really popped. I'll go ahead and lay them with Ole Miss.
This is just the second ever meeting between the two. The first meeting, Ole Miss won 41-17. That came 23 years ago. Next up, Buffalo at number 9, Missouri. Missouri 34.5 point favorites here with this total at 51 and a hook, Chip.
Yeah, I'll take it at the 34.5. Maybe it gets over the key number 35. I would take it at 35.5. I would take it all the way up to 37. The way I see this is that Missouri Tigers did what you wanted to see out of a top-tier team in week 1. They took control of the game. They put the opponent at arm's distance, and then they were able to get everybody out just to be able to get the backups some run. I think that this is another spot where Missouri's going to do the same thing and to just eliminate Buffalo's confidence in being being able to go into Columbia and win this game. Maybe look for Luther Burden, who didn't actually have a huge stat line just because the game was out of hand so quickly. Maybe we get Luther a few more touches as well with those individual accolades, but I do think Missouri is able to cover this number. Again, anything up to 36.5 or 37, I'll take the Tigers.
Alabama, another team moving north in the AP poll, up one spot to number 4. South Florida come visiting this week. 30.5-point favorites here, and a lot of points expected on the Bama side.
Yeah, they are expected, and I do think you see them, but I also think you see them from Byron Brown, the quarterback for South Florida. Remember, this was the game last year that was in Tampa where Alabama was on the ropes and they had to pull away late in an absolute monsoon. But Byron Brown, this first game, he had 8 rushes for 74 yards. That can frustrate any defense that's out there, including Alabama's. I think Alabama wins, probably closer to that 4-touchdown range, but I could see a late score from South Florida with backdoor cover to get to that number, so I'll take the points.
All right, let's go to 19 Kansas at Illinois. 5.5-point favorites here are the Wildcats. The over-under sitting at 55 and a hook, Danny.
They say don't bet with your emotions, but Tom Fornelli, one of the biggest Illini fans that's out there, has been bullying me on cyberbullying me out there.
Wow.
So I'm going to go ahead and fade his Fighting Illini and take Kansas here. In all seriousness, Jalen Daniels, where was a lot of concern about his back injury, where they shut him down last year, he looked phenomenal, had one of the best throws of the weekend on a big 55-yard touchdown pass. They also had Devin Neal going. Everything was clicking on all cylinders. This Kansas team, I do think, is stronger. I think they're strong enough to go in, win, and cover against Illinois.
All right, next up, Western Michigan at number 2, Ohio State. Another team staying static right where they are. 38.5 points is the difference here, Chip. The total at 53 and a hook.
Yeah, I'm going to get really specific here. I'm going to go Ohio State team total over 46.5. Everything that you saw with your eyes early on said that the Buckeyes offense was a little bit clunky, and yet you look up at the scoreboard at the end of the game and there's a 50 burger up there. I just think that's going to be the nature of some of these games that are a little lopsided, where not that Chip Kelly and Ryan Day want to specifically score 50, but they do want to be able to continue to work things out on the fly in a way that's going to lead to a lot of late touchdowns. So I think that we flirt with 50 again. So I will go Ohio State team total over 46.5.
Top 25 college football picks here on HQ with our guys Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell from the Cover 3 podcasts. Welcome back to HQ. We're picking top 25 for week 2. Oklahoma scored 51 points last week, but were 1 for 12 on 3rd down. But they did go 3 for 3 on 4th down, and they're 51-3 win over Temple. They get Houston this week. Clemson trying to get into the win column versus App State. Mountaineers are winners in week 1, and both Oregon and USC look to keep the Big Ten's dominance going. They're both multi-touchdown favorites. Welcome back inside our HQ studios. The Cover 3 podcast does a locks pod every Thursday, but we can't wait that long. We're getting Chip Patterson and Danny giving us their top 25 picks today. Now, things can change between now and Thursday's pod, so that's why they're picks, not locks at this point. So let's go to Houston at Oklahoma. 15 Oklahoma as it stands in the AP poll. 29.5-point favorites are the Sooners. 50.5 is the total here, Chip.
Houston down bad, real bad, 20-point home loss to UNLV. And while the Rebels are good and a team that might be competing for a Mountain West title, that is not how Willie Fritz wanted to start his tenure as Houston's head coach. But I don't want to take the Cougars for the full game. I don't want to take Oklahoma for the full game because the Sooners were showing that big-time program mindset. And what do I mean by that? They won by more than 40 points, and all their fans are furious. And why are they furious? Because as you mentioned, Jeremy, they could not convert a 3rd down. And when the starters came out of the game, the backups did not look that good. I thought Jackson Arnold was excellent in red zone situations. He clearly has a great chemistry with Deion Burks, who I think is going to have a superstar season after transferring over from Purdue. But I am a little bit concerned about Oklahoma's depth, so I want nothing to do with the second half of this game. Let's focus on the Oklahoma that we can trust. That is the starters. We go Oklahoma minus 17.5 in the first half.
Deion Burks 3 touchdowns last week, and as Danny will tell you, NFL quarterbacks, they make their money on 3rd down. That's where it all comes through. So they need to get better on 3rd down in that game. All right, App State at Clemson. Danny, I don't want to say this is a must-win game for Clemson, but I'm saying it's a must-win game for Clemson.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, it has a lot of undertones of sort of what you saw with Florida State after they lost to Georgia Tech. It was a must-win game against Boston College. They lost. That's a conversation for another day, though. I'm getting my blood boiling just here talking about that. This is the game you would expect Clemson to roll, right? The get-right game. I'll tell you what, though, App State, that little engine that could coming in from Boone, they have given ACC teams fits over the years. They even one of the biggest, giant killers going all the way back to that, historic upset against Michigan. And the thing is, I don't think App State wins the game, but I do think they keep it close. This is a monumental game for them because it also could factor into the playoff selection. They're a team from the Sun Belt I do think could be in that conversation. How does it look at the end of the game? The final score, how close did you keep it? I think they're going to keep it inside that 17.5. I'd seen Clemson winning by 2 touchdowns, but not more than that.
All right, Boise State at number 7, Oregon. Oregon, one of the tumblers this week as they go to 7, but stay inside the top 10. 18.5-point favorites are the Ducks. The total 61.5, Chip.
Yeah, I'm going to attack that total, and I'm going to go over. One of the great statistical anomalies of week 1 was how Oregon's yards and points did not line up. Dylan Gabriel's stat line looks great, but the Ducks only have 24 points on the scoreboard. I think that when we look at what Boise State did in a bananas shootout game at Georgia Southern, that shows me that Boise State can go out there and score a bunch, but that their defense is also very, very susceptible. And so as the Ducks want to be able to do a better job of punching it in the end zone, and as Boise State has its own ability to score thanks to star running back Ashton Jeanty, I don't think Jeanty's going to have 6 touchdowns like he did against Georgia Southern, but I think he has enough and Dylan Gabriel scores enough that we're able to take this thing over 61.5.
By the way, Boise State have never lost to Oregon.
Wow.
3-0, pardon me, all time. All right, Utah State next at 13 USC. This is a 28.5-point difference at this point in time with this total. 63 and a hook, Chip.
I'm going to go under. The USC under train might be one of those positions that you take until, things start to catch up and everyone starts to realize that this is a Trojans defense now under defensive coordinator Danton Lynn that isn't just doing arm tackles out there. And so any position where you've got one of these sky-high totals, but especially in a little bit of a hangover spot on short rest after, Sunday night being in Las Vegas with that big-time win, maybe the offense isn't coming out and lighting up Utah State like you'd expect, but I do expect the Trojans' edge that they showed on defense. That is something that can withstand a hangover game. So I'm going to attack the total, especially at the key number of 63.5, and I'll go under.
And here's a stat from the research pack. Quarterback Miller Moss has recorded 370 or more passing yards versus 2 ranked opponents, both wins, in his first 2 starts. Caleb Williams did that once, just so you know. Time now for some best bets in a big battle in Iowa this week. The clash for the Cy-Hawk Trophy, and it is on CBS and Paramount Plus. The total for the Iowa State game this week is 35.5. But of note here, the under 17-2 in the past 19 meetings, including 5 straight unders, with those 19 meetings averaging 38.7 total points per game scored. All right, so let's talk about it with our guys from the Cover 3 podcast, Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell. The battle for the Cy-Hawk is where we start. The 21 Hawkeyes favored by 2.5. Chip, what are you thinking here?
I'm thinking that's disrespectful, all right? Because this is a new era. A new day has dawned for Iowa football, okay? We're going to just take it all. We're going to go Iowa team total over. We're going to go full game over. But my very best bet for the Cy-Hawk is to take Iowa, especially at this number of under than a field goal, because I looked at Iowa State and the way that they played against North Dakota, and there's not a lot to hang on to. I thought Rocco Beck, the quarterback who I like, was just okay. I thought that the running back Abu Sama, who is a very gifted skill player, had an awesome hurdle, but not a lot else. And most importantly, for both Iowa team total and Iowa to cover the spread, Iowa State lost a starting linebacker to an injury, and I don't think he's going to be back for this game. And so as I take Iowa and all of the great energy and vibes you have coming out of this game where you had as many passing touchdowns to a wide receiver as you did all last season, Iowa State, who is like, ugh, glad that's over. I'm going to stick with the vibes, and I'm going to go Hawkeyes all day, baby.
I checked checked the DK model before the show, and it shot out a score at me that was 21-17, which is right around the points per game that this has been throughout the past 19 meetings. And so I'm going to say it goes over. The odds makers are finally tired of losing. They're saying, no, it's too easy to take those unders. So that's why the number has been set so low, 35.5. Plus, you mentioned it, Iowa, new offense. They got the good vibes going now. Tim Lester's showing some new looks. And more importantly, Reese Vanderzee finally shows the freshman wide receiver. Cade McNamara finally has a threat on the outside that he likes. I think that's the difference in this game. So I'm going over 35.5 points.
Is the DK model college football 25?
There might be some influence in there with that.
Okay. Next up, let's go number 3, Texas at number 10, Michigan. Oh boy, this is going to be a humdinger here. Texas 7.5-point favorites. This total a little bit higher than the Cyhawk game, 43.5. Danny, what are you thinking here?
So this one has been back and forth. This is probably one of my least confident plays. But I'm going to go ahead and say this is one of those overreaction plays that everyone loved what we saw from Texas and what they did against Colorado State. And Quinn Ewers out there throwing no-look passes and showing off. And Michigan looked awful, right? Their offense, they don't have a quarterback. Donovan Edwards didn't run. Their offensive line didn't look great. But I think Michigan's defense keeps them in this game. Wink Martindale's going to throw the kitchen sink at Sark's offense, confuse Quinn Ewers somewhat, keep it within that 7.5 points. Anything over a touchdown, I love the Wolverines as the home underdog.
Yeah, you've got to be concerned about Quinn Ewers, somebody who's just never gone into a hostile territory. And what's that? They beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa last year. Oh, they led a huge comeback and nearly took down Washington after being down by double digits in the college football playoff. Quinn Ewers is made for this moment. And Michigan's quarterback situation, I mean, we haven't even made a decision in terms of who's going to be able to step in there. I do like the under in general. I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to go in there and throw for 350 yards or anything like that. But in these games between heavyweights, what ultimately ends up happening is that one of your offenses has got to go make a play. And I just have so much more trust in Quinn Ewers to be able to deliver that, even against a Michigan defense that has, elite players on the defensive line, and Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Josiah Stewart once again showing up as a great edge rusher. And look, Will Johnson almost had as many touchdowns as the offense did. So I understand and respect the Wolverines defense. It's why I would lean under. But I do think this is a spot where you might be factoring in the home field advantage too much, because you've got a quarterback in Quinn Ewers that has dealt with this kind of stage before.
I think one of the stats I was reading earlier today was the fact if Texas can win this game, it would be 2 years in a row. They'd be the only team, I think, in the modern era to go to 2 non-conference teams that are AP ranked and win out on the road in both of those games. They are just over touchdown favorites against Michigan. Let's go to Tennessee at NC State, one of 2 ranked on ranked games this week. It's 14 versus 24. Chip, what are you thinking here in terms of what you're seeing from this line, which is 7.5, the total sitting just over 60?
I think that Dave Doran needs to find a way to get his team better prepared than they were for the Western Carolina opener on Thursday. I mean, the distraught face that I saw from NC State's head coach was the coach that had realized that they didn't quite bring enough to be able to match the level of compete of what Western Carolina brought. Now, NC State has a special talent in Casey Concepcion, and Grayson McCall settled in, so they were able to get there. But, man, Tennessee is the opposite of what NC State did in terms of how the Vols handled their business against FCS opponents. Nico Iamaleava comes in there and lights it up. But talking to people around the Wolfpack program, the thing that they're concerned about is the Tennessee defensive line. I think that all the Nico hype is warranted. I think he's going to have a tremendous year. But the reason why Tennessee is a player for the college football playoff is because if they can complement Nico with a nasty defensive line, that's exactly what they have. I think it's the defensive line that is the big difference maker in a Tennessee win and cover.
Chip, that sounds like a massive overreaction to what we saw last week against these 2 opponents. Like there's panic in Raleigh. I'm going to go ahead and jump on that overreaction too, though. I'm going to say Nico has a field day. James Pierce Jr., one of the top NFL draft picks on that defensive line for Tennessee. And what concerns me is the transfer portal guys that have come in and tried to cram and learn a system quickly. They've all kind of struggled early out of the gate. I think NC State will be fine over the long run. We saw them have to really dig deep in the bag to get 3 touchdowns in the 4th quarter to pull out a win against Western Carolina. I think they'll be fine in the long run, but in this game, I think it's too much Tennessee. I'll take the Vols as well.
Your college football best bets with our guys Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson here on CBS Sports HQ. Their best bets presented by FanDuel, America's best sports book. Make every moment more. In terms of a recap here, the three big games, their best bets. Iowa State at number 21, Iowa, 2.5-point difference there. The battle for the Cy-Hawk Trophy on CBS and Paramount Plus. Danny says take the over. Chip likes Iowa. He likes Iowa all over the place in that, all over the board in that game. In terms of Michigan, Texas, Danny likes Michigan here to cover that spread. Chip likes Texas. They're both on Tennessee as they take on NC State, one of the two ranked on ranked games. And the Cover 3 podcast, you want to be sure you're checking that out. Latest episode is upon further review, a second look at the results of the weekend and the biggest takeaways as they get you set for week 2. Download and follow wherever you get your pods.